Okay, everybody, if you could take your seats, please. We've got the recording going. Hopefully, we've got a lot of people around the state of Florida who are tuned into this. I want to thank everybody for coming. My name is Evan Rosenberg, and for those of you that don't know me, in blue sky times, I'm your state recovery chief out of Tallahassee for the Division of Emergency Management. And in times like this, I'm the Deputy State Coordinating Officer, and I tend to live out of whatever JFO Joint Field Office we have going on. So I would say thank you for inviting us all into your local area here, but I realize you guys don't really want us here, right? When we show up, that's not usually a good thing, right? So, thank you all for coming. Thank you, John Dosh, for supplying us with equipment and a place to have this meeting here. What we've done is many of you have seen me come around Florida and at different meetings and different places and different webinars talk about alternative procedures. We've been very lucky in that we have not had very many disasters over the last year since they implemented alternative procedures. We had the one here in the Panhandle, DR 4138 storms and flooding last year, and right now we're right back into another storms and flooding event on a slightly bigger scale. So what we've done is we've invited Mr. Brad Kiserman, who is the Assistant Administrator. I want to make sure I get the title right. The Assistant Administrator for the FEMA Office of Response and Recovery out of FEMA headquarters. He's the main man. He's the big boss for everything response and recovery generated out of FEMA. We also have Mr. Bill Roche here, who is the Director of the FEMA Public Assistance Program itself, once again out of FEMA headquarters. We've asked them to come down, spend about an hour and a half with us. We're going to have a presentation and then a Q&A. So let's get the word out on alternative procedures, on the Sandy Recovery Act and alternative procedures. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our main speaker, Brad Kiserman.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, folks. Bill and I are very happy to be here with you, whether you're on the webinar or here in the room. John, thanks very much for hosting us here. You guys have a great EOC. Maybe we should just stay. This is way better than what we got at headquarters. This is excellent. What we'd really like to do today is give you an overview of these two new pilot programs, one that deals with debris, the other that deals with permanent work. As Bill and I were coming in, I said, I don't think we'll end up talking about debris, but some of the briefing we got this morning, I think it'd be worthwhile for us to talk a bit about debris, which we'll get into in just a few moments. But we're also going to really want to focus a bit on the permanent work, category C through G. And I'll say right up front, the pilot programs, which you will often hear us refer to by their Stafford Act section number, section 428. So you will sometimes hear us call this the 428 program or a 428 pilot or the 428 project, as distinguished from section 406 of the Stafford Act. That's the section that governs the restoration, repair, and replacement of facilities in recovery. So the fact is, 428 is really a set of procedures. It doesn't change, strictly speaking, eligibility. 406 still determines your eligibility, just as 407 determines your eligibility for debris. That said, the flexibility that Congress has given us through Section 428 is probably the single greatest significant change to the Stafford Act since the law was enacted back in the 80s. I sometimes have difficulty conveying the gravity of that change to folks, and I have yet to come across the right analogy, the right visual image, but I'm going to try with you all for the first time today, one that I made up in the car on the way from the JFO to here. So if nothing else, you'll at least be amused. I think that the fundamental difference for permanent work, right? Debris is a different animal altogether. So I'll just focus for just a moment on permanent work, which we will then pick up the thread on a bit later in the presentation. I think the major difference for permanent work that 428 brings you is making a choice between whether you want Las Vegas or whether you want Wall Street. That's really what it comes down to. 428 fundamentally is about working to a budget, and it's a budget that you determine, you as the applicant. It's not FEMA determining your budget. You come in and say, this is my estimate, I have confidence in my estimate, I can work to this estimate. This estimate is your budget. You go over it, that's on you. You come in under it, that's your money. Within that budget, you have, frankly, more flexibility in what you do with that money than you do in the Vegas model. In the Vegas model, which is the standard program, you come to the FEMA slot machine. We will take your money one nickel at a time, and we do it by taking your documentation, right? We're going to take your doorknob I see nods in the room. We're going to take your doorknob documentation. We're going to take your sheetrock documentation. We'll take your roofing documentation, and we'll just put it in the machine one thing at a time, and we'll pull the handle. And depending on who's working in the JFO or the region that day, you could come up 3 cherries or you could come up bust, right? Because let's face it, we have a program. We really want to be world class, but it's about people and judgment and subjective decision making and timing and a lot of variables that I don't control as a program executive from Washington. Because in the Vegas model, in the standard 406 program, that's actual costs. And if we're going to pay you actual costs, you're going to give us actual documentation for every actual cost, and we're going to make a judgment about the eligibility of your doorknob. And that's what we do. And you're tired of that. And I've only been doing it for 5 years, but I'm tired of it too. So when Sandy came around, Superstorm Sandy, within moments after impact, congressional interests were on the phone with us, and our authorizers, our appropriators, and they were saying, we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity in the aftermath of Sandy to change something that needs to be changed. What do we need to change to make it better? Because we are not going to have a repeat of Katrina or Rita in Sandy. And so within 90 days of Hurricane Sandy's impact, Congress had passed an appropriation, and bolted onto that was the Sandy Recovery Improvement Act, passed at the end of January in 2013. And one of the things that it did was add this new Section 428 to the Stafford Act that allowed us to develop a set of alternative procedures for both debris and permanent work. A lot of people hear Sandy Recovery Improvement Act and they say, well, that's just for Sandy. It's not. Many of the provisions were made available to any disaster that was already open and for which work had not yet begun at the time of the law, that the law was passed. So while these were Sandy was the catalyst, if you will, for these changes, New York, New Jersey, and the other 11 Sandy states are not the only beneficiaries of them. Florida can be a beneficiary of them right now, and what Bill and I would like to achieve today is to help you understand what the programs are, how they work, when they're right for you and when they're not right for you. And I will be the first person to tell you 428 is not for everyone. I am not here to sell you on 428. I'm here to make sure you understand your choices. If you have eligible work and you follow the process, whether you follow the 428 process or the 406 process, at some point you're going to get some money. So a lot of this just depends on what experience you want to have. So I want to make sure you understand your choices. There are pros and cons to both of these programs, if you will, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask questions. Let me begin with the law. So first of all, Section 428 has a provision in it that says you can use alternate procedures for permanent work and for debris, provided you achieve 4 goals. These are up on the slides for those of you who are viewing the slides on the webinar here in the room. The first is reducing costs to the federal government, right? So we have to reduce federal government costs of providing assistance through the PA program. That is one of the requirements of the law. So I'll give you an example. If administrative costs don't come down, we're not reducing costs. So the alternate procedures, both for debris and for PA, have built within them tools to bring administrative costs down. That means that if you are holding on to documentation until day 60 after the kickoff meeting because you want to, for some reason, hold that to the last minute, that is not reducing administrative costs. And we will end up losing this authority if we don't all work together to make sure that we are obligating dollars to you as quickly as we can. Because that's the third bullet that you're going to see here. Expedite the provision of assistance to our customers. Congress has told us that the reason we've been given these procedures is to expedite the provision of assistance. Let me turn that into something very real. I'm being measured by how quickly we get money out the door to you. If you don't give us the documentation that we need to get the money out the door, I can't get it out as fast as you want me to get it out. I'm going to be very upfront with you. If you have consultants that are telling you to hold on to your documentation and wait for the last minute, you might want to get different consultants. Because Congress told me and Congress told you that we are supposed to be expediting the provision of assistance. And in the end, that's about money out the door to you. And that is easily measurable in days. I went to the JFO this morning. I got the morning report for 4177. It tells me that I have 60 requests for public assistance, that I have currently projected 330 project worksheets, and we know that there's an additional request for additional counties, so we're probably going to see this move to about 1,000 PW disaster. There are 0 project worksheets obligated. 0. So my boss, he will give me an F. My boss, who used to be some of your bosses. And if you know Craig, you don't want to get an F from Craig. It's not fun. So I fail. I have failed because you have 0 PWs obligated. I told Laura this morning, that's not her failure, it's mine. We got to work with the JFO and with you all and with the region to get money out the door, especially for your Category A and B work. And where debris is concerned, these alternative procedures, it's not just money, right? It's an 85% federal cost share, 87% if you have a debris management plan approved. That's a significant bump up from our normal 75-25. It's 85% for the first 30 days, 80% for the next 60. The trade-off, as we're going to talk about, is that we expedite. We do it faster. What we're paying for, what that extra cost share, federal cost share is, we're paying for speed. Speed of the removal of the debris, speed of you getting reimbursed. That's what we're buying with that cost share. If we don't have your documentation and we can't write your PWs, we fail, Congress takes the authority away, you don't have the choice. You don't have the freedom, and you don't have the plus up in the cost share. I need your help. On this one, I need your help. Now, we're also supposed to increase the flexibility of the administration of assistance. And one of the things Bill and I are going to talk to you about, especially in the context of permanent work, is how we can increase your flexibility under a 428 project. Your flexibility to consolidate various projects, to roll multiple PWs together, to use your underrun and your overruns so that you end up with no net losses. The law told us we've got to increase flexibility for you. I'll also tell you this. In certain projects, when you can put together a very powerful repair package under your consolidated work, that generates additional 406 mitigation dollars. You may have greater mitigation flexibility. You can build it back stronger, build it back more resilient, just because you have an economy of scale and you can generate more dollars. And remember, for every 406/428 dollar we generate more 404 money. And that gives you more options for 404 mitigation statewide. So there's real value in this. Last but not least, Congress has required that we provide financial incentives and disincentives for timely and cost-effective completion of projects. So when you hear me looking at the PA readout for the morning and saying we have 0 PWs obligated, one of the reasons I'm focused on that for both permanent work and debris is because we are under a statutory mandate to get the work done, and we want to help you do that. I'll just flag for you that I did take a look at the stats for 4138, which were the severe storms from last July, and I get that what's happening in some places is that you've got 4138 activity that's not completed, you now have repetitive loss to the same facility for $41.77, or you don't, but you're sharing scarce resources to do the repair or restoration for $41.38, and you got $41.77. And here's the thing I'm worried about. I'm worried about 41, add your next two numbers, and it comes at the end of August, and it's a big old hurricane. And now we've got three disasters racked and stacked, and we're trying to segregate the damages and figure that out. I don't want to be there. I want to help you get your work done from $41.38. I want to make sure you got your money from $41.38, and then we want to get $41.77 done, and God willing, we don't have to worry about anything at the end of the summer, but if we do, we're ready. So that's what I think Congress told me I got to do to help you all, and that's what we want to do with that. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get right into the pilot program, and I'm going to ask Bill to go ahead and kick us off, and we'll go start with debris, and then we'll move into permanent work. If you have a question at any point, I'll pause now, raise your hand. We will do a Q&A at the end for everybody, including the webinar, but if anybody in the room's got anything, want to pause me, not a problem. I'm happy to answer. You don't have to sit here and listen to me talk for an hour. Okay, we'll get right into Bill. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Good morning, everybody. Quickly, I want to take you through the two pilot programs, one for debris, one for permanent work. There are timetables to these. They're available to all eligible applicants. They're voluntary, as Brad had indicated to you. There could be, there will probably likely be opportunities where it's too high of a risk and you don't want to participate, and that's okay. So the permanent work program launched on May 20th, 2013. That's a pilot that is under the law 3 to 5 years, or until such time that we promulgate our rules and regulations.
So let me one of the questions that we can both, why don't you stand there? We can stand in the same places and not have to dance or move. We're good. So one of the things that we frequently get asked is the question that these are pilot programs, so when do they end? We asked for the authority to create pilot programs because if we had a way to do regulations for these, it would take 5 to 7 years to put regulations in place. So when the congressional staffers in the aftermath of Sandy called us and said, we want this available now, what do we have to write to make that happen? We said, then you've got to write that we can do a pilot and waive regulations, because otherwise we can't do the things you want us to do, because regulations have the force and effect of law. So unless we can waive them for the pilot, nothing we can do. So when people say, how long is the pilot going to go on for, the pilot isn't going to sunset, right? The pilot, we're authorized pilot authority for as long as we have to pilot, but we are committed to doing regulations. The problem is we don't want to do rulemaking until we understand what's happening in the pilot. You don't want us to create a rule that puts something into law that doesn't make sense. So we were able to put the pilot program together literally in 4 months. I mean, the law passed in January 29, 2013. As Bill said, by May, we were doing pilot around the country. So we knew that we went quickly. We knew we didn't get it all perfectly right, and so we didn't want to go into regulations with that. So you don't need to worry that if you start in the pilot that you're going to somehow get booted out of it because it's going to sunset. That's not the case. We have pilot authority for as long as we need it, but like anything else, we've got to be able to demonstrate to Congress and our executive leaders at the White House that we are making reasonable and diligent progress towards a permanent program based on regulation. But you don't need to worry that it's going to go away. It's unless we abuse it or Congress removes our authority, it does not have a sunset built into the law for either the permanent work or for debris. Good.
So there are distinctions, though, between the two pilots. The debris is renewed, must be renewed on a yearly basis. We just yesterday sent out the extension for year 2, which will bring that program back into play or continue it in play through June of 2015. That said, the permanent work is the one that really doesn't have, it's the 3 to 5 year. And the reason I'm using those terms, the OIG under the law is required to present a report to Congress, not less than 3, not greater than 5. So this is about collecting data, right, and being able to show where and how we've scorecarded against those 4 elements of the law in the reducing costs flexibility in those things that Brad talked about. So let me quickly, the slide you see up there right now is on debris, okay? There's a sliding scale component, which is meant to accelerate both the activity of the work and the higher cost being paid for that speed. That is 85% at 0 to 30, 80% 31 to 90, reverse back to 75-25. After that, through day 180, let me be clear, the differential between that day 180 and 6 months, right? Under the sliding scale component, if you're participating, the states do not have the authority to extend. That doesn't mean there won't be, it's dead there, but the federal government has that authority to justify and extend based on your circumstances.
So let me do the why. Why did we do that? We did that because we have a congressional directive to expedite the delivery of assistance. If we are granting extensions for debris removal past 6 months, we're not expediting unless there are extenuating circumstances. And we all know there could be hazmat, there could be extenuating circumstances. But one of the controls that we had to put in place to demonstrate, again, to our federal masters, both in the executive and the legislative branch, was that we would pay particular attention to those extensions. And so the authority was vested by regulation. The states had the ability to extend the period of performance for debris beyond 6 months. We withheld that now to the federal government so that we can properly manage and oversee those extensions, because if they may not be consistent with expediting the delivery of assistance. And let me also take one other moment on the why and begin with the end in mind. Somewhere 3 to 5 years from now, the Inspector General is going to issue a report to Congress, and he's going to address all 4 of those issues, those criteria that I led off with. So I want to be able, in everything that we do, to demonstrate how we're meeting and hitting each of those marks. And one way that we can demonstrate that we're expediting the provision of assistance in debris is by demonstrating that we reduce the number of extensions beyond 6 months, that we got the work done in 6 months, wherever. And then when we didn't, there were good reasons for that, not reasons of contractual delay, but reasons that are operational in nature.
Thanks, Brad. So the remaining 3 bullets up there are probably familiar to people. You know, we ran a pilot in 2007 and 8 that had these same features to them, a couple of tweaks to them. But the recycling of revenues is retained by the applicants. The reimbursement for straight time is allowable for under 407, and the management plan incentive is there. However, it's a 2% increase, and it's a one-time only use of that. The next bullet down there talks about it only being the sliding scale being only used for large projects. That has changed in year 2. We're applying the sliding scale to both small and large projects, so they're eligible for smalls as well. Gets to the point of things we learned in year 1, and we wanted to make some adjustments where it made sense.
Yep.
So that's the alternative procedures.
Let's cover. So one thing I want to cover, I get this question frequently, especially from contractors. We are not doing debris grants based on estimates. Debris is an actual costs environment. We're doing permanent work based on estimates. We'll get to that in a minute, and I'll give you the why on that. I would love to get to debris. I'd love to get the block grants for debris. I would. That would be awesome. But there's not a person in this room, I bet, that had any confidence in any estimation tool across the scale of all debris, right? It's wet debris, it's dry debris, it's white debris. None of us have confidence that we have an estimation tool that would get us to a number where we could cap that grant and be sure that our costs were covered. And on the other side, the IG doesn't have confidence that we can get to a number that's not grossly inflated, right? So none of us are comfortable with that. Actual cost makes sense. So the trade-off, if you will, is then if we're going to buy speed, let's buy it with a cost incentive. Let's incentivize going faster by increasing the federal cost share. And so you know the normal basis for this is it's a 75% floor for federal cost share, 25% state. So we have put 10% additional federal skin in the game for the first 30 days. because the theory is if we can get you moving and really put some money into that and put some effort into it, we can get the debris cleared faster and get people back in their homes, businesses back up and running. That's where we really get the biggest bang for the buck. For the 60 days after, so from day 30 to day 90, you're getting an 80% federal cost share, so we've got a 5% increase in standard federal cost share. And then from day 90 to day 180, it's at the standard 75-25. And then at day 180, you should be done. If you're not, you're coming to us, not to the state for an extension, or the state's coming to us for the extension request. So a couple things I just add to that. If you have a debris management plan approved, your 85% becomes 87%, your 80 becomes 82. And you guys know on some of these bigger debris, 2% is a lot of money.
And your 75.
Right, and your 75 becomes 77. So you're winning in that entire 6-month period and working to a better budget. The other part of this is, and I don't want to lose the thread, straight time and force account labor. It used to be the case that we could not reimburse you to use your force account for debris removal. During Sandy, we got the president to issue an emergency regulation allowing us to reimburse the Sandy states for straight time for force account, turned around, flipped that to Congress. They made it part of the law, so now we can do that for everybody, especially for smaller debris events and even not smaller debris events. Why not use your force account if it's going to help you get cleaned up faster, and we're going to pay you for that? By the way, if you're in the pilot, we're paying. If you're in the pilot and you're using straight time and you have a debris management plan, we're covering 87% of your force account costs. Get them on the street, because that will clear the debris faster. I hope this is starting to fit together and make some sense. And then on the recycling revenues, we have not had a lot of people take us up on that. We've had a lot of people take us up on the pilot. Do you know the numbers off the top of your head?
No, I don't, but it was largely in the tornado and more.
Yeah.
So there was concrete and stuff like that was recycled.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a lot of it.
And we can put you in touch if you have concerns about the debris pilot. Moore, Oklahoma used it. I think we've got almost 35 other jurisdictions and several hundred PWs on debris under the pilot. So we can put you in touch, and we're happy to work with Brian and Evan and company to get you points of contact so you can talk to other county and local emergency managers, municipal emergency managers who've used the program. But they seem to be satisfied because they're coming back for subsequent disasters. But we're not getting a lot of takers on debris recycling, but you can keep your program income from recycling. So if you're in a position where you can recycle, why not?
And from an administrative position, right, since we're getting actual costs for those 30 days, next 60 days, and the first PW is for 30 days, version 1 of that PW is for the next 60, we're really doing closeout on the front end. So the reconciliation piece has really already been done. At the end of this, we should be able to bless that and say, what's done is done. I mean, obviously, if there's outlying invoices, we're going to address those, but we're not coming back 5 years later, right, trying to close a project and then having somebody make another decision, right, 5 years later that causes an appeal and all these other activities. So keep that in mind going forward because we're collecting actual cost data.
So, yes.
Same PW, it's a version. Well, that's why we made the change in year 2 to allow smalls. In year 1, if you had a small project, you couldn't get the 85% cost share because it wasn't allowed under the initial pilot. It might have, though, if version 1, if the next 60 days pushed that project over to a large, then it would retroactively, allow you to have that 85%. So we just wanted to clear some things up that if you never got there, you still had access to that 85% cost share. Keep in mind, we're kind of butting up against some stuff here and creating a program where in smalls you have simplified procedures, right, which are in and of themselves, right, block grants to a degree, but they're also done on estimates. So we wanted to get into that actual cost program so we could turn down the administrative costs. And so our hope is, and what we've seen in other areas, is that after the first 30 days, right, first off, there's monitoring of that activity in the first 30 days by teams out there on data collection. And then usually by day 40, we get the data, and by day 50, it's obligated, right? And then we go into the next phase of version 1, which is the next 60 days. And most of the time, we're Oklahoma, and an Oklahoma event, day 89, all debris was done. 99.2% of the debris was done at an 85 and 80% cost share.
John?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, as you pose questions to our speakers, make sure you use a microphone so the people on the webinar can hear that side of the conversation as well. It's just a push, let it up, talk, and then push it when you're done.
And so for those folks who are on the webinar, the question that was posed originally was if we're going to give you a version of a PW for the first 30 days, so two parts, does that mean we're doing one then from day 60 to day 90? And what happens if during the first 30 days your project still looks like a small project, doesn't look like a large project yet? And the answer is, one, the distinction between small and large projects for debris and the pilot is no longer a distinction. We don't distinguish between them anymore. The pilot is available for all debris, regardless of the size of the PW. So that takes that small, large problem goes away with that. And then the answer on the versioning of the PW is right. We'll version the PW so that you get the 85% cost share for the first 30 days, the 80% for the next 60, and then the 75% for the remaining period of performance. The other thing, too, is we talked earlier about making sure you submitted documentation, load tickets. If you're submitting documentation for the first 30 days on day 40, and then on day 60 you have additional documentation for the first 30 days, as long as it's non-fraudulent documentation, we'll version the PW and give you the money, right? So it's not a problem to submit documentation in slugs, if you will, right? That's okay. This is about expediting the delivery of assistance. To me, that means two things. It means that the debris gets cleared and you get paid, and both of those things happen faster. So whatever that takes to do it, we're willing to work with you to make that happen. Yes, and use your mic, please.
It's my understanding that if you elect to participate in the program, that all PWs associated with debris have to be included in the program. Is that correct?
Bill, so if you would like to participate, does every PW associated with debris?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to?
Well, our sanitation department.
Okay.
Well, so you're already in the program for the sliding scale for the first 30. That gets to our point about that seems to be a slam dunk justification that if you have circumstances that you couldn't get to that debris at day 180, you would request a time extension, we would review it, and then allow activity beyond 180.
So let me tell you how we've addressed this elsewhere, because you have a very similar. So I went out to Oso, Washington. You've all heard about the landslide, mudslide in Oso. So Oso had very similar concerns about the debris removal. It wasn't dredging a bay, but it was a recognition that it would be a while before they could get to true debris removal, because they were really in search and rescue, and all we were doing was essentially moving those things that were necessary to continue to find body parts, right? And you really couldn't disturb the rest of the debris field because there were still unaccounted for remains. So, we knew there was going to be a delay to begin with. So where that was concerned, I agreed to not even start the clock for them until they had completed remains retrieval and given notice to proceed to their contractors for standard debris removal. We have that discretion. My view was nothing in that decision did anything other than expedite assistance, because you couldn't get to it any sooner anyway because of the remains retrieval mission. Then there's the concern that downstream they had a very complex hazardous waste problem in what was basically a 100-foot deep debris field, layered with a hazard. It was a mess. And they said, there's no way we're going to be able to do that part of it within 180 days. I said, great, let's write that into the FEMA state agreement that we acknowledge up front that these areas are going to be outside the scope of 180 days, that we anticipate and would be favorably disposed to respond to your request for extension. That gives you some degree of assurance that you're not going to end up losing out on the potential for your standard 75-25 cost share for your dredging work. So we can negotiate that with you, write it in so that you have some assurance, or maybe not some, maybe you have all assurance. Depends. I need the facts. But Laura will be more than happy, and her team, to work with you, Laura and Susan. When you have those kind of facts, it's not an all or nothing deal. If we know up front and we can foresee together that 95% of this can be done in 180 days, and you're going to have this one or two, very compelling problem set, we will work that with you, and that's the way we can make that work. And then you still get the benefit of the program. Does that work? Okay. Other questions on debris? Or on the webinar? Anybody on the webinar have questions on debris? If you'd like to ask a question on the webinar, press *5, and we will stand by and give folks an opportunity then. I'm sorry, it's *6. You're killing my credibility here, Ryan.
Honey,
we've got you loud and clear. Go ahead.
when does the clock formally start, or is that a judgment call based on a scenario similar to what you just described?
The clock starts at the date of the incident, as defined in the declaration.
I am willing, and again, I want to be very careful here. Bill's cringing as I say this, but I know. All right, so I'm going to take a quick pause. So I took over this job about 4 months ago. I used to be the chief counsel of FEMA. So I was very involved in very involved in the drafting of these laws and all that stuff during Sandy. I'm very clear on what the intent of Congress was. And what I've told my staff is, in delivering recovery services, I want them to use this performance metric, and I call it ESP squared. Remember ESP from when we were kids, extrasensory perception? So the amazing Kreskin bending spoons with his mind. So ESP squared, empathy, simplicity, partnership, professionalism. That's what I want them to do when we're delivering recovery services to you. So part of empathy is anticipating your needs. So if you can anticipate that you've got this particular dredging issue, and I'm assuming this is Escambia Bay or right, I was in the Coast Guard, had a patrol boat in Nokomis, operated up here all the time. I got it. So we can have that conversation because that is a genuine issue where there are compelling facts that would allow us to deviate from either the start date for that or allow you to continue beyond 180 without cutting you off. There's options there. But the rule, and because this is about expediting assistance, the rule is that it begins from date of incident, right? So if I change that and I change it too often, I have the IG in Congress, when that report comes out, coming in and saying you didn't expedite assistance because you didn't enforce a rule that drove it. So vast majority of time, the answer is going to be it's the date of incident. If there are compelling factors or circumstances, either to grant an extension or to move the date like we did in OSO, we'll do it. But again, think in terms of we had remains of 50-some people. That was a driver for us to not disrupt that debris field. It would need to be something of that magnitude. Other questions? *6. One in the back of the room. Sir. And your mic, please.
I see on your fourth bullet you have the 2% incentive for the debris management plan.
Yes.
I'm the state debris environmental officer, and we tell people it's an approved debris management plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. It's not the plan that you made up yesterday night. It's your previously approved debris management plan. And so,
yeah, and we're using the word acknowledge that it meets the criteria that we would need to have a stand-up management plan. The reason for that is when it gets to the pre-approved qualified contractor, we can't approve that, right, on our side. And the regions are looking at those plans as they're submitted by the local communities and saying, yeah, this meets everything that's under 325 in debris management.
Other questions? *6 on the phone. Okay. Oh, that one?
Somebody.
Okay. So we will then go on to permanent work. Before Bill gets into it, let me also address a question I get all the time. So one of the questions I get all the time is, are the debris management and the PA alternative procedures for permanent work tied together, or can an applicant choose one and not the other? They are not tied together. You can choose one, you can choose both, you can choose neither. It's about choice architecture. It's up to you. So you might have an environment where the alternative procedure for debris is favorable to you, and you want nothing to do with it for permanent work, that is your call. We have had other applicants make those decisions. We've had applicants make just the opposite decision, that they want to use it for permanent work, don't need it for debris. Although I will tell you, most applicants, since this was put into place, who have had debris declarations are using the pilot for debris because, let's face it, you get a better cost share. So you make that work. Or you can take neither. But they're not tied together. You have choice. Bill?
Sure. Thanks, Brad. So the permanent piece and the features of that up on the screen, you'll see five bullets. Draw your eyes to the number 2, which is the referral of cost estimates for the expert panel. That of those 5, that's the only one that you have access to without accepting a fixed grant first. Everything else, the consolidation piece, the elimination of the alternate project penalty, and the use of excess funds only comes after you accept the fixed grant based on the estimate. The obvious reason for that is we're using that expert panel. It's a set of other eyes looking at validating cost estimates that come in from our customers. Realize, if we can agree on those damage impacts, we want those applicants, you, giving us the budget for that project, okay? We want you to give us real-life estimates that you're confident in, that you can move ahead with accepting a fixed grant. And then the economy of scales of combining 10 fixed grants only go higher, right, because you may contract all the work together or in phases. So the other point on this is, and you'll see it probably over the next 30 days, we're going to reissue year 2 guidance revisions, and we are moving the date to accept a fixed grant from 9 months to a year, to 12 months. So it's 12 months from declaration to work with us, work with the state to get a fixed grant based on an estimate. It's also 12 months, not on top of that, but the same 12 months to come to us and say you want to consolidate project activity. When you accept a fixed grant, you may accept 10 fixed grants, 10 separate fixed grants. At the time of that acceptance, you may choose to consolidate 5 of those and let 5 stay on their own. 4 months later, you may decide, hey, I've got these 5 projects out here that are individual, and there's some activity going on where one's running over, one's running under, and I kind of want to offset that like we do with small projects, right? So you can request to consolidate those into the overall, what I like to believe is a global grant that has a fixed cap estimate based on the aggregate of everything. Now, there's administrative things that we'll do to make sure that the states have some, tracking and accountability of that. And where you consolidate, if you're consolidating 5, we're going to pick one of those 5 and bring the other 4 with it under that single grant, okay? But the idea here is to give you, one, a larger pot of money to do your recovery strategy with, right? It's not a repair-in-kind program now, right? The estimate was based on that, but now we have just switched into a world of, I accepted a fixed grant, and if I want to, if I've got a 4-floor facility and the 3rd floor was, a bunch of classrooms, and I want to make it my auditorium, have at it, right? Because we're not coming in there later closing your project on a doorknob-by-doorknob environment. We want, if you can make it better, we want you to make it better. We want to give you the flexibility that good will come from bad, and that good is making that facility a more useful facility for you.
So I think this is probably a good pause point just to do a quick narrative of what's really changed here. So the standard program is actual costs, detailed line item accounting, detailed receipts, and if you give us a line item or a receipt that's not putting it back the way it was, that's not eligible, right? If you want to put it back differently in some way, then that's an alternate project or improved project, but you take a 10% hit on that. We give you on the alternate. So when we negotiated these changes to the law, what Congress ultimately landed on is you're going to do this under a fixed cap grant,
we're going to accept your estimate, right? So this was the key, I think, and this is, I think this is the key for all of us. If you have confidence in your estimate, and as long as your estimate is compliant with FEMA policy, it's the one thing I don't want to lose in the conversation. And it's not some big hidden secret or a poison pill. It's just that we're generating a dollar sign, we're generating a grant number based on your eligible disaster damage. And then we're going to generate a mitigation number based on eligible mitigation. We're going to package that together, and we can package it together for one facility, or we can package it together for 100 facilities or 100 roads. And we can, or 100 roads and 100 facilities. We suddenly have that flexibility. When we put all that together and we give you that fat fixed cap grant based on that estimate, you don't take a 10% haircut because you've decided to change something. That's your call. So you don't take a penalty for trying to put it back better or put it back in a way that's more what you need now than when you built it 80 years ago. But you do have to work to that budget, because if you go over, there's no more money. It's not an actual cost. So the quid pro quo was, there were a lot of FEMA employees who would say, I can't accept the applicant's estimate. We've got to do our own estimate and validate all of it. That's not true. Congress told us, if you read the statute, we can accept your estimate. Why? Because we want you to have confidence in your estimate so that you're comfortable going, using this part of the program. Sir.
When you say to better the facility or the function, okay, can you double the size of the facility to make it better? In other words, we have, we lost a jail.
Yeah.
Okay, and it presently houses 700 inmates. We have a need to have 1,500 inmates, and we have another jail right adjacent to it. It's still in the flooding area.
Yeah.
So to make it better, we would need one jail to house 1,500 inmates. So would this be a program for us to build a 1,500-bed jail versus put it back the way it was at a 700-bed jail? If
you can do it on the estimate that was based on the impacts to the facility. We're not going to give you an estimate for a 1,500 capacity facility when you had 700. But if we agree on the damages to that 700, to that existing facility, and the estimate that is provided, right, you feel you can accept on a fixed grant, you can go build whatever size jail you want to build. We're not going to give you any more money.
Did you also tell me that part of the jail, the second jail you have, is built in a floodplain?
Yes, it's still in the flood, the same sector in the flood area. So there's a potential for it to flood.
So I guess I'd say just a couple things about this. So one, is this the jail that was the gas pipeline explosion related jail? Okay, so I think just for reasons we both understand, whatever I say is going to depend on the outcome of the investigation and whether somebody tells me this is disaster-caused damage, right? So assuming we have a jail with disaster-caused damage, a couple things. One, I would sit down with if we get to the point where we're doing this jail, we're going to send down the A-team, we call them SEAL Team 6, or DEAL Team 6. We're going to send in DEAL Team 6, so Laura and Susan, because that project, and I looked at it a little bit before we came in, that's a project that's like north of $80 million. So I would want to send in mitigators who are very creative and understand the full range of 406 mitigation options for you, people who understand how we might apply Part 9 in this situation to help you make some decisions there, and then folks who can help you look at your disaster damage, and you're going to want to generate an estimate that's going to give you the most confidence that you can go in and build the jail you're eligible to build. Now, you can take that money, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here. If you're going to turn that into a 1,500-person jail, once we've given you that pot of money based on your disaster-caused damages and your disaster-eligible mitigation, as long as you stay within the same footprint and don't change the environmental piece of this, that's always a little tricky here, right? It's one thing if you're going to stay in your same footprint and change function, change purpose. So this was Bill's point about I changed something on the 4th floor. Not a problem. But if you're expanding out, 3 acres
That's going to change your environmental historic preservation footprint, and then we're in a different world. We got to do that EHP piece.
Right, but that's no different than in the standard program
No different
today
at all.
where we do improved projects, right? The applicant, the states approve improved projects. Guess what? You need to come back to the federal government with that new scope and get it cleared before you can do anything. So really, a fixed grant is an improved project. Let's not kid ourselves,
Right.
because you're accepting that fixed grant, so you have the flexibilities to do different things. And we welcome that. We want you to be in that position. To Brad's point about the jail, it's a destroyed facility, right? So it's probably a replacement.
Yeah.
Right? So we got over that hurdle. There's no 50% rule
Right.
that we got to deal with.
Nonetheless, it's a pancake.
But you've got a replacement facility that now we look at the mitigators and say, do we have elevation here? What can we do through benefit cost to maximize the resiliency and protecting that facility for the future? And all those dollars go in with the restoration element, and then that's provided as that fixed estimate. And now it's decision time for the applicant to say, well, we believe that we can work with designers and else and whatever that might be, and say, let's accept that. Let's do a larger jail and hopefully stay within the budget. And if I don't, then that overage is on the applicant. But it at least allows you to go somewhere, maybe 75% greater, whereas in the standard program, guess what? Not available.
So I think that's my bottom line answer, and I'll take hope out of the equation, right? Because hope is not a plan. In the standard program, I don't see any way you get to that 1,500-bed facility, right? Because because of the actual cost nature of it, we can never give you actual cost for that. In 428 process, because we're generating a number in a PW, right? We're generating a number, and we're generating mitigation that goes in with that number. Once we have that number, as long as you are staying in the same EHP footprint, and even if you're not, again, we do the EA to get you where you need to go. You can use those dollars. You can change scope. You can do what you need to do. We'll work with you on that, but you'd never have that opportunity under 406. Does it get you 100% of the way there? Probably not. Right? You probably end up either using 404 mitigation dollars, or you end up using other dollars that you have or that you get access to. I don't know if you have CDBG funding, whatever else you have, but you're certainly getting a greater contribution from the Stafford Act money than you might otherwise get because you've built in that flexibility.
Or you look at that other building that I'm assuming wasn't damaged but has the potential of being damaged, and work with the 404 program
to
possibly mitigate that, and then combine all those dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, in the estimate that the expert panelists, do you allow a contingency in the estimate?
Yeah. So the way so Bill was alluding to that when he talked about planning for real. We recognize that you've got to build in some contingency for what you're doing for cost of inflation as you go forward. And so, yes, the answer is that, and sometimes we build that into soft costs, sometimes it gets built into different lines, but everyone recognizes that there's a need to build in for that. Otherwise, the estimate is.
Is it a percentage, or, I mean?
Let's put it, we are going to validate the estimate. Okay, so we're going to bring in professional cost estimators that understand what they're doing. Could be, presently we're working with the Corps of Engineers in their Walla Walla facility out in Washington, and they have districts all over the country. These folks have a lot of experience in doing estimating of huge 50, 100, 150, multi-$100 million projects. They'll be looking at that and giving us some feedback, right, on that estimate as provided, so we have a pure look at, and they'll look at the real life. This makes sense, okay? And it's a budget that then you folks can work with going forward. So, and I think, Brad, we've gotten some questions. What does the OIG think about that?
Yeah.
So what we're doing through the acceptance of fixed grants is we're defining reasonable costs.
Right.
Comment.
So I think I'll be very straight up with you about this. First, I want to be clear in the answer we gave you. You're going to have to make a decision about what you want to get on the other end, but I don't think the standard program would get you the flexibility to even get close to that. I think the 428 process gives you that, and that's classically why this was done. And the real reason it does is because you have a destroyed facility, right? This is a replacement, and it's ideal. And I guess I would just say, if you are replacing rather than repairing, although 428 is great for repair, and I'll give you some examples of it, where replacement's concerned, if you have replacement projects, I'd be looking real hard at 428 for just these reasons. Okay, a lot of people ask about the IG. I was going to address the IG issue, if that's okay. Let me do that first. I got a lot of questions about the IG. So, Evan, where is Evan? I'll take the IG. I'm going to do the IG thing. All right, so I don't know what the IG thinks. I really don't. John Kelly and I, who's the assistant IG for emergency management for DHS, have a great relationship. We continue to have conversations about these. I give John a list of all the 428 projects so he can make some decisions about where he wants to expend audit activity. I know John is very willing to be proactive and preemptive. If you felt like you had a project that you wanted the IG's blessing on before you agreed to it or before you undertook it, I think John would be very receptive to that. And I would have no objections to doing it. I don't want to be the one to call the IG and say, you should come look at this project, because I don't think you want me to be that guy. But if you want that, I think you work through Laura and the team at the JFO. I can tell you they're very open to that. We have authority in the regulations to do case-by-case waivers of the Part 13 regulations that deal with acquisition. So as you all know, if you are the state of Florida and the state is the applicant, the state follows state procurement regulations. If you are Escambia County or you are a subgrantee, you follow federal procurement regulations in Part 13 of 44 Code of Federal Regulations. If you're a municipality or locality, and if you're a PNP or private nonprofit, then you follow 2 CFR, right? So we have authority to do case-by-case waivers. We do not have blanket waiver authority. I can't stand up in front of you and say, I waive all these regulations. But we do have the ability to do that. Some of you have already met with the disaster procurement assistance team that I established when I was the chief counsel, and that was now serving Bill and I very nicely in our role here in recovery. They are happy to review your procurement plan or your procurement rules for your jurisdiction to see whether they comply with the federal acquisition regulations and where the delta is. We have done this for other applicants. And if you have areas of noncompliance, we can make some decisions about whether or not we want to waive a regulation up front and specifically for your jurisdiction or your project. And I am willing to do that. Again, you need to work through the JFO. So far, just to tell you, I haven't had a single jurisdiction that needed a waiver. When the procurement lawyers sat down, went through their procurement plans, they were compliant with the federal acquisition regulations. So we're happy to do it with you, and frankly, I think it's a good exercise, especially if you look at the IG findings over the last several years, and I'll cover that at the end when we have a few minutes. I've given the state and the region and the JFO a summary of Florida's IG audit findings for the last 3 years, which means for disasters going back, 8 years, because the IG is always coming in time late and looking backwards. And I've broken that down for you by area of audit finding and cost and cause. And what you're going to find is the vast majority of your audit findings have to do with contracting and procurement, your contracting and procurement. So if you wanted to apply some intervention early and get bigger bang for the buck, I'd focus on contracting and procurement and your accounting. That's where you're getting dinged. There's very few things on eligibility. I've given you where they are so you can see them and be alert to them. But it's contracting, procurement, and accounting. And our contribution to that is the disaster procurement assistance team. They will work with you. All you need to do is ask. We'll review contracts with you. We'll review contracting procedures. We can get ahead of it and fix it. So you heard Bill mention earlier, I'm not entirely sure why the IG is focused on the issue of reasonable costs when we're in a fixed cap grant environment. The IG has not definitively said to me that they will not look at it. And let's put yourselves in the shoes of the IG, my ESP squared, right? Let's be empathetic to the IG. They're not going to commit up front not to do something. They don't know what they're going to find. So all I would say is, my argument is this. If you give us an estimate and agree that we can give that to our expert panel which is the Corps of Engineers Cost Estimation Center of Excellence in Walla Walla, Washington, and the Corps comes back and they bless your estimate, I'm not really sure what the IG has to say about that. You can draw that conclusion yourself. You know where I'm going to come down. I'm going to come down that you gave us your estimate, the law allowed us to accept it, and that the expert panel approved your estimate, and they're no slouches. So I don't know how the IG comes in and second guesses that. I leave that to the IG, and John is aware of all these conditions. But this program has only been around for a little over a year. So we have not gotten to the completion of anybody's permanent work yet, nor would you have expected us to. No, you know, permanent work doesn't get done in that speed. So we don't know what the IG is going to do with this. So if you're asking, is it a gamble, here's my answer. I certainly don't think it's any more of a gamble than an actual cost environment where the IG can look at your doorknobs and your windowsills. And I frankly think, and again, my professional opinion as the program executive, I frankly think that if you have a validated cost estimate from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Cost Estimating Center of Excellence, you have the closest thing to a get-out-of-jail-free card that we give you in this program. I don't know how else up front to demonstrate due diligence any better than this, and I don't know any insurance companies, reinsurance companies, or contracting or construction contractors that have any better due diligence than this. So I can't do any better than that. And then I'm going to get to the gentleman. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I have so many questions. One more. What's the turnaround time for Engineers to validate? I mean, I'm sure it's based on complexity and size, but a $100 million project, I mean, turn around a week or is it 6 months?
Presentation mode is now disabled. Presentation mode is now enabled.
Changes if there's something there that's not allowing them to do it, but that's part of the speed of this.
That's why we're using them, because they've got whole staffs sitting there doing nothing but cost estimation. Big projects. I'm going to get the gentleman, then I'll go to you, sir.
This goes back to the Escambia County Jail situation. One of the things we're looking at is 406, repetitive loss issues, and trying to replace our jail. So you would recommend still, you think we have a better chance of getting full replacement costs at using 428 versus 406?
No, that's not what I said.
No, but it's a great question because I think it illustrates a point. 428 is a process by which we deliver 406. Okay? So the comparison of 428 and 406 when we start to talk eligibility is a false comparison. There's nothing in 428 that creates new eligibility. The reason you end up getting potentially a better or more favorable package under 428 is the economy of scale you get by bringing pieces together, and because once you brought those pieces together, then you have flexibility in how you use those dollars. You can do some things with the 428 process because you're under a fixed cap grant that you wouldn't be able to do under actual costs.
So the best way of illustrating that is the excess funds component.
Yep.
Right? You manage it well, you retain dollars, right? If you manage it well in the standard 406 program, guess what?
We'll be obligated.
You retake it back.
Okay, so the great thing is you've already committed SEAL Team 6 to us, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, and I have committed them to you. So SEAL Team 6 is committed to you for the jail, and I'm saying that in front of a large audience, so Laura, you will hold me to that. But yeah, if we go to that project for a whole lot of reasons, look, we want you to be successful, right? And I know people come on here and say that all the time. I believe this. I believe that we're here to help people when they most need our help. If it turns out that the jail is eligible because it's disaster-caused damage, if that's the ATF conclusion, then we need to help you rebuild that jail. That is a fundamental government service. You need our help. We need you to be functional. And I don't want the IG coming back 5 years from now and de-obligating that funding. So DEAL Team 6 will probably recommend an IG review so that we make sure that that is locked tight. You don't want to. So anyway, I'll probably beat that horse enough.
One last thought on the excess fund usage. The folks that have participated in the program to date, all of them are you don't want to get to the excess funds. You want to look at the consolidation piece along the way, because there's far more flexibility in using the money while you're doing the projects than if there is a a ruling at the end that you've completed your projects and you have excess funds, because at that point, you can only use them for what would be mitigation activity. Okay, so if this speaks more to project management and making sure that, and that's why we put the consolidation piece in there and gave plenty of time to do it going forward. Yep. So just think about that as the applicants work through their recovery, I'll call them strategies. This is about a strategy to build back better, and where can you get those flexibilities in doing so. Yeah.
Great.
Is the referral of cost estimates to the Corps of Engineers only for projects over $5 million?
Yes. And oh, by the way, that's at no cost to the applicants. It's fully funded by FEMA. But yes, it's only for projects that are $5 million or greater. That doesn't mean we won't have resources within the confines of our JFOs to have those cost estimators there as well, yeah, to validate cost estimates if you want. And it may not be, right, a situation where you send it to the Corps. We might choose to send it to the Corps. Right.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is if you want to increase your level of comfort that cost estimate has been validated externally as reasonable before you go forward, basically as a sort of certificate to the IG, we'll work with you on how we do it, because that's a fundable cost. That's an eligible cost for us to do. The fact that the Corps wouldn't do it is because for them, they're saying, hey, $5 million or less, that's not worth our time, right, because they do so much of that work. Did you have a question?
I do have a question. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but to what extent does FEMA do its own disaster-caused damage analysis?
Okay. So we're going to rely, right, if there's questions, and I've been doing this since the 94 earthquake in Northridge, so if there's a question about whether or not that damage was the result of that event, flooding, tornadic, whatever that might be, I would encourage the applicants to go get themselves a licensed engineer that would give us a report that ties and connects the dot. I would caution people that an engineering firm, when hired, right, is hired to assess a building for all its abnormalities or deficiencies. The key is telling that engineer, I need you to connect the dots on what this storm did to this building. Okay? It gives everybody an assurance that we can then just simply validate and review that, and then have at it give me a scope of work and an estimate to repair. Because this is never about the scope of work and the cost estimate when we don't agree on the damage, right? I don't care what I've done coming to taking this job as the director of headquarters was saying, God, folks, let's go back and agree on these damage estimates, because if we're going to spend months and months to give somebody a scope and a cost estimate on something we don't agree to up front, we're wasting everybody's time and huge dollars in administrative burdens that have been wasted. So
the specific here would be that we're doing all that. We have our own experts. ATF will do its own experts. The problem is we were told by the FEMA team that they wanted to provide yet their own person to draw an independent analysis separate of all those people, but that person has not yet been presented to us.
No. So,
we don't even sit around and wait on
no.
that person.
So here's how this is going to work. So I want to get a little better briefing about where we are, but here's my conception of where we go going forward. The cause of an explosion is not something for which FEMA has any particular expertise, right? I can barely change a tire. So the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is the federal expert on investigating explosions on fixed facilities. So ATF is going to come back and they're going to have some finding on what the cause of your explosion was. You've obviously engaged your own experts who are going to come back with some sort of finding. If they are licensed certified engineers and they sign a piece of paper with their stamp that says the cause of this explosion was the hurricane or was the severe storm, I'm done. We have what we need. The next thing we do then is we're going to have to validate whether there were any non-disaster caused damages, and based on what I think you're going to give us, if you and ATF come in with the same report, and you got a flattened jail, I think we're kind of done. It's just going to be replacing the facility, and then we just have to get into the work that's associated with that.
ATF is still confidential, maybe for months.
Well, without getting into a broad conversation in this audience, I guess what I would say is I'm more than happy to take this up with you offline. I don't think it's going to be months. I think that if we need to make a phone call, we'll make a phone call. We need their data. The only thing I would suggest, and I share this with the group broadly, where you have an issue that you know the IG may take an interest in down the line, and where everything is at stake. So remember, it's not like your IG is going to come in and say, oh, we recommend deobligating $500,000 because this windowsill wasn't eligible, right? No, they're going to come in and say the cause of the destruction was nothing to do with the storm, deobligate $80 million, right? You don't want, so where that's happening, at a minimum, I would suggest that we, the state, the applicant, the IG, we all sit down together and say, this is what we have. If ATF has confidentiality concerns, we can probably protect those. We all sit in a room, we all look at the report together. And again, the IG is never going to tell you on day one that what you spend at day 900 is okay. What they'll tell you on day one is we're not going to challenge the ATF's findings because they have no more competency than we do to determine what the cause of an explosion is. So we can take this up offline about how we expedite this because I would like to get to an expedient conclusion on the jail. Because from my perspective, once we get the issue of whether or not the cause of the damage was the disaster removed, right, we'll put it a different way, once we determine the cause of the explosion, once that's out of the way, it's either a Stafford Act eligible project or it's not. So if it's disaster damage and Stafford Act eligible, let's get down to business and figure it out with y'all. We don't want to wait 6 months for that, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting, one second.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions on the webinar. The first question is from Rhea Maris. Rhea, go ahead and press *6 and ask your question. Again, Rhea Maris on the webinar regarding what the excess funds can be used for. Please press *6. Okay, and we had a second question from Sonia Negley. Sonia, press *6.
So I can answer the first question as far as the use of excess funds. It's mitigation activities and any future planning for disaster operations going forward. And all of this guidance document, the guidance documents are online, but that's why I encourage folks to really not get to the point where you've got the use of excess funds. The management of those funds are better used within the consolidation process and your overall recovery strategy going forward. So, but there's still going to be mitigation opportunities for you, and we would look at those projects. And the other part of that is, if we start, through good management, creating new projects, it doesn't really help us out in defending the speed of recovery and that piece of the legislation. So,
other questions in the room or on the call? Okay, I'd like to let me wrap up with just a couple of points real quick. Do you want to do this?
Yeah, the slide on special considerations quickly. We've alluded to some of these. The EHP component doesn't change. If you've accepted a fixed grant, you're going to choose to do something else. The state and the federal government need to know what that is, so we don't put you in jeopardy down the line in doing something that's outside of a footprint. We've had applicants that have accepted, consolidated projects on schools. And because of the budget that they accepted and the consolidation of stuff, they've combined 2 schools into one, enlarged footprints, changed the configurations, dug into new soil, right? All day long, that's going to be jeopardizing your project if you go and do something.
And so I just want to be real clear. As you all know, the National Environmental NEPA, the planning statute, there's no way to cure a NEPA failure other than deobligation. So if you have not done the EA or the EIS or the required planning activity because you have gone outside the footprint or you've changed scope and you've dug in and you're proceeding, there is no cure for that other than us deobligating. I can argue all day long for the reasonableness of it. I can argue all day long that you didn't have any actual harm to the environment. Every time I do it, I lose. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. This is flexibility, but we still have to comply with the environmental historic preservation laws. In many cases, at least the ones we've had, that has not proven a problem. You just have to do that pause and do the EA, do the EIS, whatever's required in order to comply with NEPA, and then we move on. But it's why it's important that if you're going to change the footprint, we do that.
Yeah, and we're not really learning that 9-10 months in. I mean, the staff should be working together from the kickoff meeting forward, that if you're going to get into this program where you're going to do some things that are different, we got to, front load that stuff.
Right, the jail's a good example. I mean, you know that if you're going to end up building a 1,500-bed facility, maybe in a different location or going outside the existing footprint, that it's not like we've just found a snail, the elusive and rare roach snail that, we suddenly discovered when we were doing the project. It's not like that. It's like, we got to design. So that's all it is. I don't want to make it sound scarier or worse than it is. It's just being sensible about it. Brian, do we have one on the phone?
Yes, we do. Angie Smith, go ahead and press *6 and ask your question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If I understand correctly, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. If we were to have an underrun on a project and it can only be used for mitigation activities, does it have to be used on that particular project, or can it be used for mitigation on another approved PW?
Yes, the former, as long as it's what would otherwise be eligible for the program. So if you've got mitigation on a different project that you want to perform, absolutely, as long as we understand what that scope and what that benefit is.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly. So since the question was on 406, let me go to that bullet. There has been cases, and it will be done on a case-by-case basis, where we have allowed applicants to retain their 406 dollars when they do not rebuild in the exact location. Okay? Standard program, if we give you mitigation and you choose to take that repair and mitigation and go replace that facility someplace else, mitigation will not go with it. We will allow you under this pilot to retain that as long as there's some evidence shown that the risk reduction is equal to or greater than the benefit that was the basis of the money. Example, Vermont flooding in Irene, a community of buildings along the river up there, 50-plus buildings, where they said, hey, we want to take the lion's share of these functions and activities in these buildings and move them on the same campus up the hill, right on the cusp of the 500-year floodplain, right? Doesn't make sense for us to say, sorry, you can't take that money, because if I tell them, no, you can't take that money, I force them to rebuild on the river, and guess what happens 2 years later? Those buildings are destroyed again. So where we have instances like that and where it makes sense, ESP2, we are looking at those things. We're presently working on some really big projects up in Sandy in New York, where the same circumstances are occurring, where they want to, and we're working with them up front, right, and getting those things blessed and codified so they can move ahead with their projects. So, Brad, any other?
No, I mean, it gets a good lead into insurance. So, again, repetitive loss, as you know, the Stafford Act requires that you obtain and maintain insurance for for any damage, replacement, or repair that we do for you. So there's nothing in 428 that changes any of that. Still required to obtain and maintain insurance for the value that we're obligating dollars. If you have an insured facility and we are doing a 428 project on that, then we will give you your insurance reduction based on your actual proceeds if they're known, or your anticipated proceeds if they're not known. If you are concerned that you're in some sort of conflict with your insurer and you are concerned that they are going to ultimately end up paying you less than what you're anticipating, we have developed over the course of doing this pilot now, we have a formula now to fix this, and basically what it comes down to is, as long as you are commercially reasonable in pursuing your proceeds, we will cover the delta if what you anticipated is not what you get, as long as you were commercially reasonable in litigating and properly getting your proceeds. Yep. So the way we memorialize that agreement with you is in what's called a letter of undertaking. So that's a little new. We don't normally do that in the 406 program, but we have done it for every 428 project. So the way this works is we write, and I think you'll see the logic of it in a minute. The PW is going to come weeks or months later because now we're going to get into PW formulation. But we agree on an estimate, right? So we get your validated cost estimate. We've had conversations about scope. We understand what the EHP issues are going to be. We have a validated mitigation number for you. We package all that together in a letter of undertaking between the state as the grantee, the applicant as the subgrantee, and FEMA. And in that letter, we also include terms on your insurance. We include terms about appeals, IG audits, some other terms just in terms of the practice of how we do it. All that gets memorialized in the letter of undertaking, and that's the deal. That's why we call them Deal Team 6. And that's the deal. We package that deal together. That gets turned into the PW. We don't change that's the deal. And so it really allows us to agree up front and in a true negotiation what's in, what's out. We list the damaged elements. And that way you have great clarity, and so the PW doesn't become the place where you suddenly find out there's something you didn't know. We do that in the letter of undertaking up front.
And that's where we speak to those insurance pieces too. So there is an agreement based on what Brad just said that those, at the end, there might be a circumstance where, unlike what we said normally, that this is a fixed grant, you will get no more dollars. There could be an opportunity. There could be a time where you go through that and find out that you've done your due diligence and it wasn't the anticipated number that you're looking for. And the reason we're looking at that is we don't want to have that be the one risk element that won't get you to participate in the program.
Right. The guidelines for this pilot program are at this website that I put up on the screen that are part of the slide presentation. It's pretty easy to find. Just go to FEMA.gov. If you type in the words alternative procedures, it will pop up. That is where the current guidance is. It will be where the updated guidance goes. We do expect to have the updated guidance out by the end of this month. You already know what's going to be in it. It's pretty much what's there now, but it does extend the time period to 12 months.
He's talking about the end of July.
Yeah. July, right. Sorry, Friday was June still. A couple things I'd like to cover before we wrap up. And, yeah, that's okay. I want to just go back to this one. Sorry. Me not being all that. There we go. No. There we go. Where's the whole... Okay. So just to wrap up, two pieces. One, again, the goals of this project. These are statutory goals. This is not some FEMA policy thing. This is the law. The law is that in executing this authority, we've got to reduce the cost to the federal government of providing assistance. We've got to increase the flexibility in the administration of assistance. We must expedite the provision of assistance to you, and we've got to provide financial incentives and disincentives for timely and cost-effective completion of projects. If you're a project manager, you got an MBA, any of that stuff at all, you have probably heard what I'm about to say over and over and over again. You can have it good, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap. Pick two. You can never have all three. Frankly, this is about as close to all three as I've seen.
You get to have it good because you're the one making choices about what you get, and it's your estimate. You get to have it fast because we prioritize these 428 projects because we have a legal mandate to expedite the delivery of assistance. And I don't know how to equate cheap into this calculus other than to say it's your estimate, right? So at least you get the money you think you need to get it done. But this is about getting it good and getting it fast, and at least getting it getting it to a budget that you believe you can work, rather than relying on, like I said, it's Wall Street or Vegas. Wall Street, you're working to a budget professionally. Vegas, you're kind of putting those slugs in the FEMA slot machine and hoping it all comes out good in the end. So one thing I would like to close with, I know there's some uncertainty over how the IG views all this. I will continue to work with John Kelly and his team. We'll continue to keep you informed. Here's what I can tell you about where Florida has been on the past. So as I mentioned to you, I just gave a report to the region, the JFO, and to the state. Florida's audit data over the last 3 years of all of the audits done nationwide, Florida was audited about 17% constitute Florida audits. That's not unusually high, but it's a little high for the rest of the country. So you're getting audited fairly frequently, and I think you should expect to be audited. That's one. That said, your question costs represent a little less than 4% of all the cost questions around the country. So despite sort of a higher level of audits, your question costs are actually by percentage a bit lower than what you would expect to see. But again, I just want to make sure you're aware of sort of where that stands. Let me focus you in for a second on where your risks are. Your average question cost for Florida audits was about $1.9 million per audit. So when the IG comes around, you should expect about $2 million in question costs if they're looking hard at your project and if we haven't dealt with some of these issues that I'm about to cover with you. Most of the question costs that were associated with the PA program fall into these categories. So by topic, eligibility was the number one general topic of question costs, about $2 million per recommendation, although it was the cost eligibility as opposed to facility eligibility was the largest total cost, $28 million, right? So some of that goes away with this, we think, because if you're doing a cap grant based on a fixed estimate, we've already settled reasonable costs in the estimate process. So that alone should take that risk down considerably. You're doing utilities. Utilities got dinged more than anything else. Category F, utilities, about $1.6 million per audit with 14 recommendations, even though debris removal was still the largest total cost at $28 million. So debris, not surprisingly, still is the area where we continue to see issues. I don't see the pilot doing much to reduce that risk, except we do see that two things. One, a lot of the debris audits are in the contracting piece. The Disaster Procurement Assistance Team has been here, hopefully has helped you with that, and will continue to help you with that. That's the DPAT is how we bring those costs down, those audits down. The other thing is, as you guys know, the longer the debris mission takes, the higher the risk that the IG comes in and says waste, fraud, abuse, or not eligible. And so one of the benefits of being done in 6 months and paying for that is you reduce that risk of, contractors out there just looking for stuff to pick up. And you know that's a problem as much as we do. In terms of the top 5 PA categories by frequency, it was debris, buildings, parks, recreations, and other categories, utilities, and water control facilities. So debris was still your top heavy hitter with 45 recommendations. And by the way, debris constituted 36% of all of Florida's recommendations for the last 3 years. If you want one single place where you can focus on getting your audit risk down, it's debris, contracting for debris, and it's accounting for debris. So that's what the data tells you. Anyway, so the state has this information, JFO has the information, region has the information. It is shareable with you. I would use it to do some targeted interventions to help get your risk down.
We just started putting this product together. We just spent a couple of months doing a national retrospective of all of our IG audits so we could figure out where we, with you, could put some effort towards reducing our collective audit and deobligation risk. Your state director, Brian Kuhn, is co-chairing a committee with Robert Latham, the state director in Mississippi, at the National Emergency Managers Association to help reduce this nationwide. So he's been a real leader in this area and was one of the ones who motivated me to get off my dead butt and get this taken care of, so we've done that. Thank you for your time today. Bill and I have really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you. John, thank you so much for hosting us in your facility. Can't thank Escambia County enough. And Evan, thank you very, very much. Thanks, folks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming down here. And with that, unless there's any other business in the room, we're going to cut off the feed and say once again, thank you, everybody, both our guests and our guests on a wider frame here for showing up and listening. Thank you very much, everybody.